Welcome to the Big Stick Organization's podcast, Square Deal Radio. I'm your host, Henry McCarthy, and this is my co-host, Kay.
Hey.
So, it's been a while since our last Square Deal Radio episode, and we're here to finally bring you a new one. So, first article is titled this: A Chinese city is offering couples almost $2,900 to have a third child, and some others are giving newlyweds paid marriage leave to help boost the birth rate. And according to the article, the Chinese city of Hangzhou, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that, is giving $2,900 to parents welcoming a third child this year. And according to this, some other cities are giving almost 30 days of marriage leave to boost the birth rate. And also, apparently, this is a surprise to me, is China is dealing with a demographic crisis as its population shrinks for the first time in 60 years. What do you think about that?
Well, I've seen a lot about this recently. It's it's pretty easy to know where it comes from. The one-child policy and too many males has become quite the issue for China's birth rate, especially now that the majority of the females and the majority of the males have finally kind of, grown up and are now looking to get married. They're quickly realizing, well, there aren't that many female options around. The first policy that the Chinese government enacted early on, I noticed a few years back, they had the forgotten women policy, where there was a new phrase interjected, or maybe an older phrase, but it was brought back to light in Chinese society that said that any woman who was over, 20 something, I'm not sure exactly the age, but you can look it up if you want to find the exact specifics. But women over a certain age that were unmarried were known as unwanted or forgotten women, and almost like old maids used to be called to promote, couples and marriage, because, you can't you can't have babies if you don't have both men and women together. And therefore that was something that the old maid phrase was to get women to look to find young men to get married to. Well, very similarly, they're doing this in China. There's also a very strong sentiment against, whereas Chinese men can marry foreign women and bring them back to China and have babies, that's perfectly fine. But if a foreign man comes and has intercourse with a Chinese woman and takes the baby and woman away, that is a really big no-no. It's not, it might be partially because of racism, but a lot of it actually has to do with the fact of they really want to keep their they really want to keep their citizens within their country. And so, there's a big promotion for that. Now, my dad travels a lot, and he went over to China and definitely could tell that there were way too many men, way too few women. But he said that the funny thing was that Australian women would go to China to find Chinese men and take them back to Australia because Australia has too many women in some parts of it. So the true solution is to get Australian women to go to China. See, think smarter, not harder, Xi Jinping. Come on, man.
Would you say is the biggest factor in like the de-emphasis of women in China's society? You think it's Chinese tradition?
Well, I believe a lot of the de-emphasis, turning women back into not really objects, but, not quite what us Western societies would approve of. Kind of stripping them of their rights and putting them back in a, lesser than male stance. A lot of that has to do with Chinese tradition. Sure, it also has to do with the de-Maoification of a lot of things. Mao's principles have been slowly removed bit by bit, and one of his strongest principles when he got into office was Chinese women would be equal to men, because if Chinese women were not equal to men, society could not prevail. That was one of Mao's great teachings, and one of his only ones I would actually approve of is, men and women, they're equal. And he taught that very strongly. And it went against Chinese tradition, but when Mao was in charge, it was very clear that Chinese traditionalists were not going to be fighting him, as Chinese traditionalists were 10 feet under in a mass grave in one of the great battlefields that the nationalists fought the communists. So, when the demalification is occurring and China is trying to go back to a lot of their traditionalism, that is one of the things that they're reversing. Women are being slowly removed from their rights. They're being put back in traditional, worker environments where the man does all the work and the woman cooks and cleans. That's what they're going back to. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but when you're also making women into objects that are manipulated by society into doing subhuman tasks, it's just kind of, not great. But yes, it's definitely tradition coming back.
How unorthodox for a communist nation to revert back to tradition. It seems like as the days go on, China becomes more and more of a contradiction.
Well, if you look at China, it's becoming less and less communist. I mean, is it really communist at this point? It uses a free market system. It is slowly slipping away. Now, dictatorship, yes, but I mean, look at how many dictatorships in the world are not communist. There's quite many of them out there. You can be cruel to your people without going to the Marxist code, and I feel like China is definitely doing that. They're slipping away.
How long would they cling to the title of communism?
I think they'll do that as long as the Communist Party is in charge. Because the state runs everything. Like you've heard about the Alibaba case, where one of the big Chinese millionaires, maybe even a billionaire, I keep forgetting which one he was, but he had so much money that he could not leave China with. He wanted to get a yacht from a foreign company, and he had to go through multiple separate banks in order to get that money so he could buy a yacht. Yet he's richer than most American millionaires. I mean, this guy was one of the big owners, shareholders of, I believe, Alibaba, the company. I mean, this guy had money upon money, but he couldn't use it because the government had such a firm hold on his free market company. Having a company in China, you make money, but Father Xi Jinping wants his cut. And I mean, it's kind of what you have to pay for being a business in China. They don't have the same copyright laws as most places. Your business can flourish and grow way faster than in Western countries. That's why you see such growth in China, is their laws and market system has it so your company can just explode. I mean, it really is a new frontier. And it's why the roads are being built by the Chinese in Africa, and the companies and infrastructure in Africa. If you go into a place like Ghana, they love the Asians. They love the Chinese so much that if you even, one of my friends, she's white. Her ancestors come from Finland, but she went to China. Not China, Ghana, looking, and she does very much so look Asian. She's, tan, and she's got, long, straight, and black hair, so she looks very Asian. She went in with a group of missionaries that were all very pasty white. And they treated her leagues better than everybody else. Why? Because they thought she was Asian, and the Asians bring progress. And so when you build a company with China, you do get a lot of progress. But there's always that, the government needs their cut. And if you rip away from that government could possibly become unstable. And so, when you go in, you may not realize it, but it is something you have to take into consideration.
It's very dangerous. It's like dealing with the devil. It grants you many great benefits, but at a cost. There's a term for what China's doing in Africa right now. It's called neo-colonialism. China builds a few roads between your two major industrial hubs and gives you some industrial investment, but in exchange you do a few extra favors for the Chinese government, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah.
It's not a benevolent move by any means.
Well, of course. How many times have we committed neo-colonialism in interest of oil? We have, if you look at European gas prices right now as opposed to our gas prices, they're man, it is so drastically different. We have such good prices here, and that's because we have invested so heavily into Iraq and other Middle Eastern countries that we can always say, we can always just throw our weight around a little bit. China, they don't want to use force and they don't want to use armies. They want to use con in a few debts with some African warlords, and all of a sudden they've got some oil for their tankers so they can get a shipment in on time. It's a network, man, a soft power. And I'm sure we all know a thing or two about soft power. Unfortunately, America doesn't have very much of it, but yeah.
Very interesting topic, but also speaks a lot about the dangers of China as a great power. But anyways, moving on to our next topic, I would like to talk about Biden's trip to Ukraine. So the article I'm using for that is Secret Service opposed Biden's trip to Ukraine. Here's why he went anyway. So it's all about his surprise stop in Kiev, London. So we all know about Biden's trip there. I have yet to watch recording. So why do you think Biden went to Ukraine?
Oh, me? Well, I think a lot of it was a bit of a morale move. Biden wants to show himself as a bit of a stronger presence. In his early presidency, he was very clearly just following whatever the teleprompter said and got the sleepy Joe. But lately, it's been very clear that the Democrats want him to get a bit more of a strong man presence. I mean, there's been plenty of memes about the evil Joe Biden speech where he's got the scary black and red behind him and he warns Putin, and all this stuff, and it's a little bit comedic, to be honest. But this move to Ukraine was to show and get a little bit of respect. And honestly, I don't really respect Joe Biden that much beyond his title. Anyone who is a president of the United States, I will respect at base level because they are a president of the United States. However, I got a little bit more respect for him when I heard about him going into the Ukraine. I'm not a very big supporter of us sending all our tax dollars over there. We've got a lot of issues in the United States that need fixing. We've got a lot of infrastructure, a lot of poverty, a lot of debt that we could be paying off with the money we've sent to the Ukraine. But I do support any man who is willing to go into a possibly dangerous zone despite his own Secret Service telling him, we don't want you going in there. That kind of a move it's respectable. I don't know about you, but it surprised me when I first saw it. And I first saw it through Polish memes of, it's a photo of Joe Biden eating a bag of potato chips, and it says in Polish, I've come here to kick Russian you-know-what and eat potato chips, and I'm all out of potato chips. And, Joe Biden got like 50 of them in his hand, cramming them in his mouth, and I thought that was hilarious because, old men attempting to eat large quantities of dry food is hilarious. But anyways, despite that,
I actually heard something interesting the other day in classes. So apparently, Joe Biden did not take any Republicans with him to these talks. So this was seen as a controversial move. So apparently, back after World War I, while the Paris Peace Conference was ongoing, Woodrow Wilson refused to bring any Republicans to the peace negotiations, and that made a lot of Republicans angry, which resulted in the defeat of the ratification of the treaty in Congress. So from that point forward, presidents have normally brought along, members of the political opposition along to get some support. But Biden did not do this. What's your reaction to that?
I'm not surprised. I mean, no offense to the Democrats that elected him or anything, but he is a kind of poster boy for the Democratic Party. He just does and acts and says what the conglomerate wants him to do. His people are usually the people that are blamed for whenever Joe Biden does anything. Nobody who says, Joe Biden effed up actually believes that he made the mistake more than they believe the people that have told him what to do have made the mistake. So if he doesn't invite Republicans to the party, to the meeting, rather, if he doesn't invite them in, That's clearly because he's run directly by the Democrats, and the Democrats don't want the Republicans there. That's not really surprising. Now, of course, it makes me upset because this is a war. My tax dollars are going towards this war, and I don't even get a representative there. I feel cheated. But then again, I've felt cheated since the start because we never got to vote to go to war. We just kind of went to war.
It's a clear act of defiance by the leftist elite to show their hatred for the opposition. They're essentially saying they don't want our voice, they don't want our opinion, and it goes to show what they really think of us. They think of us as the enemy.
Yep. But yeah, I don't feel that tempted to give my tax dollars to Putin either. So it's
There's plenty of Americans who just don't want us to get involved in anything like this.
Oh well.
There's Afghanistan, Iraq, all left a bad taste in their mouths.
Well, of course, you go into so many proxy wars with other nations, Vietnam, Korea, well, Korea wasn't really a proxy war, it was more of a direct war, by the end of it anyways. But, you go into so many proxy wars where you're funding the opposite side of your enemy. After a while, you start to realize this is why we're in debt. The cumulative debt and how it circles around. If you've done the statistics, theoretically, we're still paying off some of the debt from Korea and Vietnam right now. We just never got rid of it. So many new things have come up. It's like, it's like getting in on a lease on some piece of furniture and then realizing you need another one and another one and another one. And instead of buying the budget versions of each furniture, you just keep taking out leases. And eventually you're still paying off the first piece when you get the 15th piece. Instead, you should have just been buying budget pieces until you finish paying off the first piece and then think about saving for better pieces. But instead, you just take out a bunch of leases and all of a sudden you're paying for 15 pieces of furniture at once. Well, just like wars. Instead of thinking about the Ukraine like, well, we could have transported our stuff from Afghanistan that we dumped there over to the Ukraine. We could possibly pay the Taliban for transport. And that would be way cheaper than us sending stuff over there. Or we could just send stuff over there and lose tax dollars. Well, it's a new war, so why use the old stuff? Even though we're still shipping them M113s and M114s, which are completely outdated. When it'd be cheaper to move Bradleys from Afghanistan that the Taliban are now selling to the Pakistanis. Well, before they were fighting them.
Our deficit is the prime reason why we should avoid, sticking our noses into any foreign conflicts.
Yeah.
We're in a major deficit crisis right now. We need to calm down, and we need to control our spending. That needs to be the first move of any conservative or Republican government as soon as a Republican president gets back in office. We need to control the spending, cut unnecessary spending, and we need to pinch our pennies essentially before this crisis gets any worse. Our country's leaders have just been sitting on this crisis for far too long, passing it down to the next government, and it's a very bad thing to do. That's what we did with the slavery issue. We just kept on sitting on our hands and just kept on passing it to the next administration until the problem got so bad it imploded into a civil war. I don't think the debt crisis will cause a civil war. Hopefully not,
but it could cause something like the Great Depression. Like yes. World War I kept going down and becoming a problem, and we kept ignoring it until it became the Great Depression. I would not be surprised if this sunk us into something similar, especially if China collapses, because people don't realize China collapses. Guess what happens to us next? Our economy is not rooted in itself alone. There are possible repercussions of a world economic superpower going down, especially this number 2. If China and Japan went down, we'd definitely be in trouble.
Unfortunate, but true. It goes to show the negatives of being so dependent on another superpower. State in which we should not be in at all. We should be able to be perfectly fine if something were to happen to China. We shouldn't be dealing with China as much as we do anyways, but yet here we are.
Yeah. China's become too dependent on us as well. It's kind of a bit of an issue that we've all got to deal with, is foreign nations sticking into each other's business until if one goes down, many go down, and then, well, the chaos starts.
It's just precisely why we need to bring blue-collar jobs back into America and start making it more self-sufficient. If that's anything that the coronavirus taught us, is that we need to be more self-sufficient.
Certainly, yeah.
All right, moving on to the next topic. This is something that Kay wanted to talk about. So, we're going to talk about the terrorist attack in Atlanta, which apparently hasn't been covered very much in the media.
Well,
apparently has been overshadowed by the Chinese balloon incident, which we will not be talking about today.
well,
The title of the article is 7 Charged with Domestic Terrorism After Deadly Shooting Near Proposed Atlanta Police Training Facility.
yep. Oh boy, isn't it fun that whenever the leftists shoot and riot, nobody really talks about it all that much, and then the Capitol occurs and people are still talking about it.
Yes, we will not hear the end of January 6th anytime soon.
Well, I
It's
mean,
the
like,
perfect propaganda movie.
I get blamed for January 6th sometimes. It's like, what? I wasn't there. I didn't care. I was at a New Year's party when that was going on. I was chilling, and yet we all get blamed. Whereas something widespread like, riots all across the city that go on for months on end, leftists aren't blamed for that, because no, that was a specific group of people. It's like, well, no, I mean, you don't seem to blame the Proud Boys exclusively. Well, there's more than Proud Boys out there. Well, there's more than Antifa out there. It has to go both ways. But yeah, no.
Not to them.
Well, that's because they've got scapegoats upon scapegoats upon scapegoats. We really don't bother to set those up. Because something like Antifa, it's not an organization, it's an idea. It's an idea that you can use force to attempt to dislodge oppressive, authoritative governments. Well, I know a lot of leftists that have that idea that, that technically aren't Antifa members, but would claim it if it came in handy. So that whole idea thing means, you can blame Antifa, but it has no organized structure, so when it comes down to, what about the leftist terrorists? Well, blame Antifa. What is Antifa? Oh, it's just an idea. That's all it is. You can't blame any structure, whereas, any right-wing violent organizations such as the Proud Boys or the 3%ers or anything like that, you can track that down to localized leaders and localized figures, and you essentially can track it down to the people that are in charge. You can't really do that with Antifa, so it does come in handy. But as I say often, never stoop to your enemy's tactics if you don't have to. Because
So I've been skimming this article. According to this proposed facility was apparently called Cop City by activists.
yes.
There was a movement going around saying "Stop Cop City."
Oh, my allergies are killing me right now. Oh my gosh. So Cop City is a bit of it's a mixed bag. I'm not a big fan of it because basically it creates cops at a massive scale and ships them out and stuff. And so, it gets better training for the police. I'm for that. That's going to prevent more Breonna Taylor incidents, more George Floyd incidents. It has a silver lining to it. But at the same point, it promotes the kind of police state thing going on in Atlanta. Like, if you go to Atlanta, there are police officers on every corner, yet it still is rife with crime. So you can get pulled over for doing essentially nothing while you watch somebody get robbed. Like, it's not literally that bad, but it feels like it's that bad. And I don't know why it is that way, but it does seem like despite the fact that there's so much police. Have you ever watched RoboCop 3?
I'm not.
Okay. Well, if you watch RoboCop 3, it almost feels like that. Like you've got this police state going on, but just crime everywhere. and so and so I love the scene where the one guy goes in to rob the McDonald's with a AK-47 and he turns around, there's like 30 cops and they all just kind of point their guns at him, so he drops his gun. And he says, anybody can arrest me, and they all just kind of shrug. It's so bizarre. But it does kind of feel like that, like when you're in Atlanta. And a lot of the controversy also comes from foreign governments sending their police to get trained on American soil, because it brings other conflicts into here. One of the biggest reasons Antifa has gotten funding for this is because they've been training Israeli SWAT teams to go into Gaza again. Because Gaza has been failed to be invaded again and again and again by the IDF, they keep losing to the Palestinian insurgents. Essentially, it becomes too much of a mess. They won't lose that many casualties, of course, but essentially they go into these areas to root out the terrorism and realize almost everyone's a terrorist. How do we deal with this? And they back out before they can start losing men. So they're trying to get people trained in they were trying to get people trained in Atlanta. Well, that means that inadvertently we have begun our involvement with the Israeli-Palestinian war. We've been funding it, but this is more direct. We're sending our advisors, and it's not great. But that also means that foreign investors and funders are looking at Americans saying, okay, if they're part of this conflict and I'm already backing the Palestinians, I should start backing the American communists as well. I should start backing the terrorists in America to go shoot up these groups as well. And so once again, the leftist elite, like you're talking about, are looking at funding these groups, arming them, and possibly organizing them to destroy Cop City. Of course, this is all speculation. None of this can be directly proven, but it does seem to correlate. And, for the viewers watching this, do your research. Do your research, do your thinking, but this, the factors do line up on this one pretty well. And I mean, I'm not exactly for the Israeli invasion of the Gaza Strip, but when you fund terrorists to attack American soil, you've messed up. I'm against you. It's that simple. Because that's an attack on American soil, indirectly. And I will not stand for that. That is ridiculous. But, of course, since it is leftist groups attacking Cop City, it seems like all we've been hearing about is a Chinese spy balloon, despite the fact that there were 2 other spy balloons going over during the Trump administration. And from what I've heard from one of my Japanese friends, they've been sending spy balloons over Japan for a long time now. And nobody talks about that, but now that there's one going on right now during the attacks on Cop City, you've got this going on. What do you think about all that, William, as the leader?
Well, I've always thought, ever since this whole event with the Chinese balloons occurred, that if the Chinese really wanted to truly spy on us, they have many other ways of doing so. TikTok would be one of them. No doubt any other stuff that the Chinese has on the internet that we don't know of. If the Chinese want your data, they're going to get your data. They don't need to send a drone with a camera on you or anything like that. The Chinese have ways of getting things done. But I would say that it's very odd that this whole sensation goes on while this whole Cop City thing is happening. Really, it's very unusual, just like you said. Could be some attempt at a cover-up. Who knows? It's anybody's guess.
Certainly.
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, like you said, if we've had this problem before, I don't watch the news that much. I was curious. then I heard about the Chinese movies. It was all over the place.
Yeah.
You couldn't escape it.
Well, I mean, as an unrelated possible cover-up, just for something recently, you'll notice Andrew Tate got arrested at the same time that more evidence on the Epstein Island case came out. More of that comes out, and right as that occurs, Top G, as they call him, gets arrested, and it kind of, might be covered up. Now, of course, we don't know this. It's all speculation. When in doubt, do your research, people. That is something that I always recommend. I have my opinion, you have yours. Do your research to back yours up. But it does seem like a lot of times in recent cases, whenever there's something that people with money might not want showing up, they just tip off a couple of news stations, and there you go. A lot of other conservatives have driven this into the wall, but the leftists do seem to control the media for the most part, even Fox News.
Well, I'd like to thank you all for watching this video. We'll try to pump some more videos out if possible. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Would like to say to check out our other videos. The last video I did was a speech talking about what the BSO had accomplished in the year 2022. I would suggest checking that out. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe, as well as turn on notifications, and tell your friends about the BSO and our channel.